It was a cold winter night in January 1993 in the quiet town of Bayshore. The streets were silent. Most homes were dark. Families were asleep, safe inside their houses. Nothing seemed unusual, but inside one home, something had gone terribly wrong. Katie Beers had disappeared. Just hours earlier, Katie had been inside the house like any normal child. She had eaten dinner. She had spoken with family members. Everything seemed normal. Then suddenly, she was gone. At first, the family searched the house. They checked every bedroom. They looked inside closets and under beds. They searched the bathroom, the kitchen, even the backyard. But Katie was nowhere to be found. Soon, the police were called. Officers arrived and began asking questions. One of the first people they spoke to was Katie's stepfather, John Esposito. He told the police something simple. Katie had run away, according to him. The young girl became upset after an argument and left the house alone, but the story immediately raised questions. Katie was only 9 years old. It was the middle of winter. The night was cold and dark. Why would a small child leave home alone? Police began searching the neighborhood. Officers knocked on doors and spoke with neighbors. No one had seen Katie leave. The next morning, the search became much larger. Joined the effort. Search teams walked through nearby woods and empty fields. Police dogs were brought in to track her scent. Helicopters circled slowly above the town, searching from the sky. The entire community was now involved. Parents became worried. Children were told to stay close to home. Everyone was asking the same frightening question. Where was Katie? Days passed, but there was still no sign of the missing girl. And slowly, investigators began to notice something strange. The man helping search for Katie was starting to look like he might be hiding something. As the search continued, investigators began paying closer attention to John Esposito. At first, he appeared cooperative. He spoke to police, he spoke to reporters, he even joined search efforts, saying he wanted Katie to return home safely. But detectives noticed small things. During interviews, some of his answers began to change. When asked the same question twice, his story sometimes sounded different. Sometimes he appeared nervous. These details were small, but detectives knew they could matter, so investigators decided to examine his past. What they discovered was troubling. Esposito had a criminal history. He had been accused of inappropriate behavior before. This information raised serious concerns. Detectives began to suspect that Katie's disappearance might not be a runaway case at all then. After several days of questioning, something unexpected happened. Esposito asked to speak privately with detectives. Inside the interview room, the atmosphere was tense. The detectives waited. Then Esposito finally spoke, and what he said shocked everyone in the room. Katie was not missing. She was alive, but she was trapped. Esposito admitted he had built a secret space inside the wall of his home in Islip. The hidden room was extremely small, barely large enough for a child to lie down for several days. Katie had been locked inside that tiny space. No windows, almost no light, no way to escape, just darkness. As soon as detectives heard this confession, police rushed to the house. Officers searched the basement carefully at first. Everything looked normal, but then officers began tapping on the walls. Listening closely, suddenly one officer stopped. He had heard something, a faint sound, almost like a whisper. They knocked again, and then they heard it clearly. A small voice, a weak voice, coming from inside the wall. It was Katie, and she was still alive. In the basement of the house in Islip. The officers moved quickly. They knew every second mattered. Tools were brought in, and police began breaking open the wall. Pieces of wood and drywall fell to the floor as officers worked as fast as they could. The basement filled with the sound of breaking wood. Then finally, the wall began to open. Behind it was a hidden compartment, a tiny space built between the walls. It was dark, cramped, and barely large enough for a child to move. Inside that space was Katie Beers. She had been trapped there for 7 long days. The officers carefully reached inside and pulled her out. She looked weak and exhausted, but she was alive. After days of fear and uncertainty, the missing girl had finally been rescued. Outside the house, medical teams quickly examined her and made sure she was safe. For the officers involved, it was a moment they would never forget. News of the rescue spread quickly across the United States. Television stations interrupted their programs, newspapers printed the shocking story. People everywhere were asking the same question. How could a child be hidden inside a wall for an entire week? Meanwhile, police arrested John Esposito. Investigators later discovered that the hidden room had been carefully built ahead of time. This was not a sudden crime. It had been planned. During the trial, the evidence against him was clear. The court later sentenced him to many years in prison. As for Katie, her life slowly began to rebuild. Despite the trauma she experienced, she showed incredible strength. Over time, she chose to live a quiet life away from the public eye. But her story would never be forgotten, because sometimes the most terrifying secrets are not hidden far away. Sometimes they are hiding just behind the walls.